You've never seen anything like this before. Ukrainians destroyed 15 units of Russian equipment in a single battle in just 10 minutes. Russia is preparing strikes on Ukraine's nuclear power plants. Could there really be another Chernobyl? In just a few hours, the US could enter the war in the Middle East, and Iran is openly threatening a nuclear strike. Are Donald Trump and Melania really getting divorced? A sensational insider scoop: Trump's special envoy Kit Kellogg is flying to Belarus. Details of the visit have been revealed. Hello, my name is Katerina Pagalchuk, and right now, here are the top stories. But first, like this video if you support Ukraine. And subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. Let's start with the situation at the front. Intense fighting is ongoing in the eastern Pokrovsk direction, but the Ukrainian armed forces are holding the defense. This was stated by Viktor Trigubov, spokesperson for the Khortytsia Operational Strategic Group.
The Russians are active in the eastern Pokrovsk direction. They are trying to advance and link up along the transfer route. This includes Pobihara and neighboring settlements, and they are making significant efforts. They did. That is exactly where very intense fighting is taking place. That is where the Russians are pressing very hard in certain areas, and the Ukrainians accordingly have to hold their ground in such conditions. We have not had any breakthroughs. Kiev, Europe, NATO.
And about Kostiantynivka in the Donetsk region. The enemy is trying to encircle the city from three sides, but so far without success. Although Russia is making continuous attempts, the Ukrainian armed forces are successfully repelling the assaults. One of the latest powerful mechanized assaults by Russia ended with the loss of 15 pieces of heavy equipment and several dozen soldiers. And on the Turkish front, according to one of the Ukrainian commanders with the call sign Texas, the enemy is constantly throwing new forces into battle.
We are fighting against this. Our units are defending their positions, repelling assaults, attempts at assaults by the enemy, and subsequently destroying them. So once again, there is activity. Unfortunately, there is, and for some reason, well, not for some reason, but it has increased after all because they announced the summer campaign.
In the Kharkiv region, the Russians are actively using the tactic of small assault groups. This is according to the commander of the Terra unit, Mykola Volokov.
They exert constant pressure on the frontline positions, which takes a toll on the soldiers at the front. It deprives them of the opportunity to rest, recover, and to ensure logistics and the delivery of all necessary supplies. This wears down the positions.
However, right there in the Kharkiv region, our troops are fighting back against the enemy. Here are some shots of our border guards in action near Vovchansk. Our drone versus the Russian one, and the Ukrainian drone wins. Small groups. The enemy is also using them in the Siversky direction. Here are some shots of a failed Russian motorcycle assault. Meanwhile, in the Sumy region, the evacuation of residents from frontline communities continues. Tens of thousands of people have already left their homes. According to the MAC, 34,650 people have now been officially registered. We are accommodating them in dormitories and in the transit center in this direction. According to deep state analysts, Russia is making gains, and Russian troops have advanced near Yunakivka. And while our defenders continue to hold back the enemy at the front, commanders Orot and UAV operators in the 412th Nemesis Regiment, as well as the well-known rapper Yermak, warns about Russian plans regarding civilians. Unfortunately, this is only the beginning. A terrible, bloody autumn awaits us. If possible, move out of the city to live with relatives in any conditions, as long as it's far from strategic sites and critical infrastructure. Some say that such statements make people panic. But the fact is that Russia has never stopped terrorizing the civilian population. So there is nothing new or shocking about this. In the meantime, please like this video to support the Ukrainian defenders and write a few kind words to them in the comments. Right now, they are in the very heart of hell, doing the impossible. And continuing on the topic of Russian terror, the threat of attacks on infrastructure is also being discussed by the president of Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky, citing intelligence from partners, stated that Russia is preparing strikes on the energy sector, including nuclear energy facilities. Russia is also planning further attacks against the energy sector, which may now be less noticeable to the world due to the focus on the situation in the Middle East. Relevant information is available to partner intelligence agencies. Specifically regarding the Russian threat to the infrastructure of our nuclear power generation in Ukraine, the data was provided by the Minister of Energy of Ukraine. The IAEA and Mr. Victor have also received this information. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine has passed the information on to his counterpart in the United States. And according to energy security expert Mikhailo Honchar, the recent strike on Kremenchuk serves as evidence of Russia's plans.
Period. Champion. And the recent strike on Kremenchuk is no coincidence. By my count, this is already the 8th massive and combined attack on the oil refinery. Since 2022, they have had limited effect, so the aggressor periodically conducts checks and cleanups, striking already damaged facilities again.
Therefore, although Russia has not yet carried out direct strikes on nuclear power plants, this time it is entirely possible that they might. If that happens, a few days without electricity would be the least of our worries. I don't need to tell you about the nuclear threat. But even without Russia, the nuclear threat exists. I'm talking about the conflict between Israel and Iran. But let's take things one step at a time. The escalation in the Middle East continues, and even the United States of America is being forced to intervene. As reported by ABC News, Donald Trump will decide Iran's fate within a matter of hours. They say the American president is choosing between diplomacy and war. The day before, the White House ramped up its rhetoric against Iran, stating that the U.S. knows exactly where Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is hiding and that they control the skies over Iran. The Americans also assessed the Iranians' position as weak.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
After a period of diplomatic tension, Iran has officially returned to the negotiation table and has abandoned its uranium enrichment program, according to U.S. officials. It is believed that a high-level meeting could potentially be held as early as this week, possibly even sooner, involving Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and possibly even Vice President J.D. Vance.
At the same time, Trump is furious over Tehran's silence. Meanwhile, there's a pizza boom at the Pentagon. That's what they call the sharp increase in pizza orders in the area around the Pentagon and the White House. It's considered a kind of indicator before military strikes or serious crises. And now let's talk about the crisis itself, because there is a nuclear threat from Iran. A very telling video generated by artificial intelligence has appeared on Iranian platforms. In it, a hand is stroking a nuclear warhead with the inscription "could be." Do you see this as a hint at the possible use of nuclear weapons? Because it seems that the US is taking such videos seriously. A doomsday plane was spotted landing near Washington. The last time it was in the air was in 2001 after the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers in New York. This plane can withstand a nuclear explosion and was designed to command US forces during global emergencies. Its activity signals the highest level of military readiness. This happened against the backdrop of statements by American media about the possibility of the US entering into a confrontation against Iran on Israel's side. The publication CBS writes that Trump is considering the possibility of joining Israel in strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. At the same time, the Russian Foreign Ministry categorically warns the US against direct intervention in this conflict. Military aid to Ukraine is now a secret. The publication Clash Report writes that NATO has decided to classify information about the aid.
NATO will classify data on military aid to Ukraine, Secretary General Rutte announced after meeting with Zelensky.
Interestingly, just yesterday, the Russian publication The Moscow Times wrote about this, citing 3 representatives of NATO countries. But this idea is not new, because Germany had already classified information about aid to Ukraine earlier. Among the reasons for this NATO decision is, in particular, the fact that Russia uses the alliance's informational openness for its own purposes.
Everything that is discussed or said at press conferences during official briefings appears in Telegram news feeds almost instantly, almost in real time. It gives the impression that they are following this even more closely than our own media do, said a representative of one of the leading alliance countries. Another source reported that Russian TV channels actively analyze statements made by NATO ministers in their flagship programs, interpreting them in a way that benefits Moscow.
But these are not all the NATO updates. At the G7 summit in Canada, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stated that already this year, all alliance countries will be spending 2% of their GDP on defense.
All alliance members of NATO will, as agreed, reach the 2% mark in 2025 as planned.
They are doing this obviously because of the growing threat of a Russian attack on NATO countries and due to pressure from Trump on Europe. But some alliance members are not planning to limit themselves to just 2%. Lithuania and Estonia, for example, want to reach a 5% level. Poland is also actively working on increasing its defense spending to between 4 and 7%. But NATO countries need to work not only on increasing defense expenditures, but also on improving their armed forces. Retired U.S. Army General Ben Hodges believes that the armies of most NATO countries lag far behind the Ukrainian standard, especially in terms of combat experience. And it is the armed forces of Ukraine that should be the benchmark.
In fact, the issue is not about Ukraine reaching Western standards. Most NATO armies would not be able to meet Ukrainian standards in terms of combat effectiveness. I think Ukrainians listen with a certain skepticism when we say that we will come and teach them. In reality, we should be asking them to teach us what they know how to do.
Well, the high level of training of the Ukrainian armed forces has been mentioned more than once. But every time, I feel proud of our military. And now, here's some news that is both surprising and concerning at the same time. Reuters reports that the U.S. President's special representative for Ukraine, Kit Kellogg, wants to meet with Alexander Lukashenko and is already planning a visit to Belarus.
Film Game of Thrones. The exact agenda of the meeting is unclear, although Kellogg in private conversations described the trip as a step that could help initiate peace talks aimed at ending Russia's war against Ukraine, according to two sources who wish to remain anonymous.
I wonder what they will talk about and why he is even here at all. Is another Minsk agreement being planned? What do you think about this? Write your thoughts in the comments. And while the world is on the brink of yet another major war, news about Trump divorcing his wife Melania is spreading across the internet. And it's not a celebrity tabloid reporting this, but a respected journalist and biographer, Michael Wolff, who has been studying the Trump universe for over 10 years.
TV series Game of Thrones. I asked someone from their very close circle what was really going on between them, and the answer I got was, she hates him to death.
So according to the journalist, the couple is in the process of a secret divorce, and there are plenty of reasons for it. Just consider the scandal with the porn star with whom Trump allegedly cheated on his wife. They say the atmosphere in the Trump marriage is very tense, and Melania doesn't hide her detachment, which we've noticed more than once.
TV series, Game of Thrones. That God will truly and sincerely bless you and also bless your family.
Now, the question is whether the First Lady will stay in the U.S. until the end of Trump's term, or if he'll be handing over the presidency as a bachelor. You won't believe it, but Russia has started earning less from exporting its oil and gas. According to analysts from the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, Russia's revenues from energy exports in May of this year are lower than even in 2022.
Film, TV. Game of Thrones. Compared to May 2024, Russia's export revenues from oil, gas, petroleum products, and coal have decreased by 19%, and compared to the period at the start of the full-scale war, they have almost halved. Revenues from seaborne crude oil exports amounted to 176 million euros per day, which is 8% less than in April and 22% less year-on-year.
You might ask, why does everyone say that export volumes have increased? That's a logical question, so let me answer. Although the physical volumes increased by 4%, Russia hasn't been earning more money because the price of its oil dropped to $57 per barrel. I'm really curious to see what will happen to Russia's oil revenues if a price cap of $45 is imposed on its oil. Please like this video to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our next episodes. See you soon!